In Revelation it says that they overcome him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. I don't know if you ever try to think from the perspective of someone who doesn't follow Jesus. But if someone were to walk in here with not a lot of church background and they hear us singing so strongly about the blood, it could seem kind of weird. You know? Like, man, what kind of cult is this? All like worshiping blood. And, you know, our testimony is that we've all done things that probably in our best moments we regret. Many of us have done things that have very likely wounded other people very, very deeply. And we could let that define us. We could let that own us. We could let that become our identities. We are liars. We are murderers. All the lists that we saw during that rendition of Amazing Grace. We could let that define who we are. And quite frankly, that is the chief purpose of the enemy, the Satan, the Satan. Literally a Hebrew word that means accuser or accusation or to accuse. He wants us to be defined by those things. And when we are wrapped up in shame, guys, do you realize that God created humanity, Adam and Eve, in the Garden of Eden, which is Hebrew for pleasure? He created Adam and Eve, put them in pleasure garden, and they were naked and unashamed. There was nothing to hide. And then when they sinned, they let that define them, and they hid from God, hid from the very voice of their Creator, because they had defined themselves by their failures instead of being defined by the love that God has for them. And the shame of this world, the accusation of the enemy, it speaks forth from the ground, the blood of our sin. It cries out against us that we deserve death for that. That's what we want. A lot of times when other people hurt us or people that we love, we think that's not right. That needs to be set right. They need to pay somehow. We apply that to ourselves, and Jesus came and hung on the cross and spilt his blood as a sacrificial lamb to take that reality, to separate us away from that reality, that now the blood of the lamb covers the blood that we think we owe. And so, we sing, thank you, Jesus, for the blood applied, because there's power in the blood to set us free from the lies of this world, from the accusations of the enemy, and we can be totally free forever. We're going to take communion in just a second to remember what Jesus has done for us. And if you didn't get a communion packet, they're on the table right there in the middle, and then there's a round table off to the side there. So go grab one for you and those with you if you didn't already get one. We're Baptists here. I didn't know if you know that Grace Church is a Baptist church. So you won't find wine in this little thing. You got grape juice. It is what it is. It's not what it's not. I love what C.S. Lewis said about the miracle of Jesus turning water into wine. C.S. Lewis says something like this, and it's in a I don't know if it's in an article or a paper he wrote or something, a speech he gave, something like Letters on the Boondock, or I don't know. My professor from seminary would give me lashes for misquoting Lewis, but C.S. Lewis said something about this. He said, guys, when Jesus turned water into wine, in a very real sense, he didn't do anything special. God is always turning water into wine. He created a plant that draws up water out of the ground into a fruit, whose juices go through a natural fermenting process and becomes wine. But at the wedding at Cana, the mask is off, and we see with our eyes who is really doing the work. When Jesus multiplies bread, God is always multiplying bread. A single grain falls to the ground and produces 100-fold. But when he does it in the moment, the mask is off, and we see who's really behind all the natural processes. Guys, we have bought into a lie that there is a such thing as just the natural world. The life and death and the ecosystem and the evolution, and this is not an anti-evolution thing, don't hear that. I'm just saying, we think that there's natural and then supernatural. And so we gather on Easter because, oh my goodness, Jesus did something supernatural. Death is normal. And Jesus was like, hey, I'm dead now. I'm not dead. And we're like, oh, we have to celebrate this supernatural, wonderful thing. It's amazing. Well, yes. But you know, the real power, this is what Lewis says, the real power in understanding the miracle that happened at Cana is when you sit down with a glass of wine, if you're a Baptist, grape juice, whatever. And you look at that and you say, here works the one who sat at the wedding at Cana. When you eat, you think, here works the one who's always multiplying fish and bread. That you are quickened. I love the word quickened. I'm bringing it back into my vocabulary. You know, because then if we don't keep the word quickened, because quickened means to be made alive, right? Then we lose the whole meaning of the title, The Quick and the Dead. You know, the quick and the dead, but it's like alive and dead. If you're quick, you're, it's a great word. We need to be quickened to the reality that everything is supernatural. There was nothing, and God said, let there be, and poof, there was. The air we're breathing is a miracle. You are a miracle designed for supernatural ends. Everything that we do is spiritual. We are much more than what we give ourselves credit for. Not because of us, but because of who made us. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of the cross. This passage is so beautiful. It's set up in the Greek. It looks like a poem with a verse, a chorus, and a verse. It begins, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. And then the syntax is parallel in the part that says he is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. And so it's set up with these two verses of kind of like the original creation, that he is the source of all life. The miracle of life flows from him, through him, and for him. And death ensued because of sin. And Jesus, once again, brought life. And I think just like with the other miracles that we talked about, yes, it's beyond, it's the miracle of miracles. I mean, the creation is cool, but then to become your creation is insane. When he became man and walked as a human, it's nuts. That's the miracle of miracles. The incarnation is blow your brain up crazy, right? But he was the source of all life, and so yeah, the miracle of the resurrection is crazy cool. But I think that we lose the point of it all if we just gather on Sunday once a year and say, oh man, he came back to life. What a miracle! It's a miracle! It's a miracle! Because I think the whole point of the resurrection is to call us back to what is really true about us in the first place. That first source of life of creation, that we are created in the image of God image bearers with supernatural, super spiritual purposes and identities. And Jesus, we honor the resurrection, not just by saying, whoa, that was crazy, he was dead and he's alive, but we honor the resurrection by realizing that this is what is actually real about life. And God is always bringing the dead to life. You want to talk about a seed falling to the ground and dying and producing a crop? Or you want to talk about when Jesus said he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he's the God of the living, not of the dead. Somehow, even when Abraham was dead, he was alive. Well, we don't know what that means. We just know that there's life, that God is always bringing life into death. The power of the resurrection will be found when we live with joy, even when we lose loved ones. When we live lives absolutely fearless of death and suffering, because we know there's always life on the other side. The real power of the resurrection is not just looking at what Jesus did and saying, wow, that was different. But when we look at what Jesus did and we say, wow, that's what's normal. And so Jesus gives us wine and bread to eat. A silly little ritual to help us remember that there's no such thing as normal. This normal little thing we're going to do, eat a wafer and grape juice, actually calls to mind what is truly, spiritually, deep, eternally real for all of us and for everybody. And we can be free to live that truth out for His glory and our joy and for the life of those around us. I love that. That's awesome. That's good stuff right there, right? Whew. Okay.